Have you ever felt the cold sting of rejection for simply being true to who you are? The crushing weight of standing alone when the world demands you hide your faith? Today's story delves into that very struggle. A young woman's quiet devotion becoming both her greatest trial and most powerful testimony. In our world that increasingly pushes faith into private corners, this tale reminds us that sometimes our most mundane moments become sacred ground for miracles we never imagined possible. Maria Santos kept her eyes closed for exactly 7 seconds before each new customer. Not long enough to cause delays. SuperValue Grocers prided itself on checkout efficiency, but just enough time to center herself in prayer. Lord, help me see your face in this person. Help me serve with your hands. It was a small ritual, almost imperceptible to most shoppers hurrying through their errands, but essential to Maria's soul. At 26, with her dark hair always neatly tied back in a practical bun, and her slender frame wrapped in the company's standard uniform, white button-up shirt, crimson tie, and black vest, Maria blended perfectly into the backdrop of retail monotony. She spoke little, but smiled genuinely, a quiet presence amid the beeping scanners and rustling bags. Her co-workers called her the ghost, present but somehow ethereal, as if operating from a different plane of existence. What they didn't know was that Maria's silence held volumes. 5 years ago, she had lost both parents in a horrific apartment fire while she was away at college. The grief had nearly crushed her, stealing her voice for months. Prayer had become her lifeline then, not the formal, flowery kind, but desperate whispers clinging to hope when darkness threatened to swallow her whole. Now those brief moments of connection between customers were her way of remembering that even here, surrounded by mundane commerce and fluorescent lights, she walked on holy ground. Attention all staff. The overhead speaker crackled to life, jarring Maria from her thoughts as she organized her register for the morning rush. Mandatory meeting in the break room in 5 minutes. All departments. Maria glanced at the wall clock, 7 minutes before opening. She carefully aligned her register drawer and made her way to the break room, where clusters of employees already gathered, their faces reflecting varying degrees of interest and apprehension. Regional Manager Timothy Blackwell stood at the front, his tailored suit and carefully groomed appearance marking him as separate from the store employees. At 47, he embodied corporate ambition, someone who had clawed his way up from store management by embracing every efficiency metric and customer satisfaction initiative with religious fervor. "Good morning, team." His voice carried the practiced enthusiasm of someone who had delivered the same speech at 7 other stores that week. "I'm excited to introduce our new customer engagement protocol, effective immediately." Maria felt a subtle unease as Timothy detailed the new requirements. Maintained eye contact, scripted greetings, continuous scanning while speaking, and above all, uninterrupted customer focus. The company had been acquired by Efficiency Max Retail Group 3 months ago, and changes had been rolling out in waves ever since. "Remember," Timothy concluded, sliding glossy protocol manuals across the table, "in today's competitive retail landscape, every second of customer interaction is valuable real estate. No personal activities during customer engagement, no phone checking, no daydreaming, no pausing for any reason. Any questions?" Maria raised her hand hesitantly. "What about brief pauses between customers?" Timothy's smile remained fixed, but his eyes narrowed slightly. As outlined in Section 3, transition time between customers should not exceed 2 seconds. Your next customer should be greeted while finalizing the previous transaction. Efficiency is key. He checked his watch. "Doors open in 2 minutes. To your stations, everyone." As Maria returned to her register, she felt the weight of the small wooden cross pendant against her skin beneath her uniform. The pendant, hand-carved by her grandfather and given to her by her grandmother on her 18th birthday, had been her mother's before her. "To remind you that you never stand alone," her grandmother had whispered, clasping it around her neck. Now, its familiar presence brought both comfort and conflict. The morning rush began, a blur of products, payments, and perfunctory exchanges. Maria tried to adapt, maintaining the mechanical efficiency required while preserving her inner ritual. She shortened her prayer to 3 seconds, eyes barely closing, before snapping back to attention. Even this abbreviated devotion provided essential oxygen to her spirit throughout the chaotic hours. By mid-afternoon, her register light flickered, signaling a supervisor request. Assistant Manager Denise Powell appeared, her perpetually worried expression more pronounced than usual. "Maria, can I speak with you privately for a moment?" Denise guided her to the small manager's office, where Timothy Blackwell waited, protocol manual open before him. "Maria," he didn't look up from the document, "we've had customer feedback about delays at your register." "I'm sorry," Maria replied softly. "I've been maintaining the scan rate standards. The feedback specifically mentioned you appearing to pray or meditate between transactions." Now he looked up, his expression professionally neutral. Section 5 clearly prohibits personal expressions, particularly religious gestures, during customer engagement hours. This creates discomfort for some customers and impacts efficiency metrics. Maria felt heat rising in her cheeks. "It's just a brief moment. Policy doesn't distinguish based on duration," Timothy interrupted. "Efficiency Max maintains strict neutrality in all public-facing positions. This is your first official warning. 2 more infractions will result in termination. Do you understand?" Maria nodded, words momentarily deserting her. "Excellent. You can return to your station." Timothy's attention had already returned to his computer screen, the matter concluded in his mind. That evening, Maria sat in her small apartment, the cross pendant resting in her palm as she considered her options. The job at SuperValue had sustained her through community college, providing health insurance and enough income to maintain modest independence. The current job market offered few alternatives, without sacrificing either income or the flexible hours that allowed her to continue evening classes in early childhood education. She closed her eyes, seeking guidance. "Lord, what would you have me do?" No thunderous answer came, only the quiet certainty that these brief connections to her Creator were not negotiable parts of her existence. They were air to her lungs, water to her parched soul. To abandon them would be to lose herself entirely. The next morning, Maria returned to her register with resolute calm. She would be as efficient as possible, exceed every other metric, but she would not, could not, relinquish those sacred seconds. For 3 days she managed a delicate balance, timing her prayers during moments when supervisors were occupied elsewhere. On the 4th day, Timothy appeared silently behind her, just as her eyes closed for an elderly customer approaching her lane. "Second warning, Maria." His voice was low but carried the weight of authority. "One more instance, and we'll have to part ways. I hope that's clear." The following Sunday found Maria in her usual place at New Life Community Church, a modest congregation that gathered in a converted storefront. Pastor Michael Okafor, a Nigerian immigrant whose deep voice and deeper compassion had helped rebuild Maria's faith after her parents' death, noticed her distraction during the service. "The burden seems heavy today, my daughter," he commented, as congregants filtered out after the benediction. Maria explained her situation, the words tumbling out like water through a broken dam. Pastor Michael listened without interruption, his weathered hands folded patiently. "The early Christians faced the lion's den for their faith," he finally said. "We face the corporate handbook, less dramatic perhaps, but still a test of what we value most." He smiled gently. "I cannot tell you what to choose, Maria. But remember that God often plants us exactly where someone needs to see authentic faith in action. Whatever you decide, you do not walk alone." Monday morning arrived with grey skies and steady rain. Maria moved through her preparation routine with mechanical precision, uncertainty churning beneath her calm exterior. The morning rush ebbed around 11, leaving brief lulls between customers. During one such pause, Maria's hand unconsciously rose to touch the cross beneath her uniform. She closed her eyes, seeking strength for whatever came next. Lord, if this job must end, guide me to where you need me next. Excuse me, dear. Maria's eyes snapped open to find an elderly woman standing before her, elegant despite the rainwater dotting her expensive wool coat. White hair framed a face lined with years, but animated by alert, assessing eyes. Maria recognized her as a semi-regular customer who usually went through express checkout. "I'm so sorry for the wait," Maria began, reaching for the woman's items, a small carton of eggs, premium tea, and imported biscuits. "No apology needed." The woman smiled. "It's refreshing to see someone take a moment for reflection in this rushed world." Maria returned the smile cautiously as she scanned the items. "That will be $27.18, Mom." As the woman reached into her purse, Timothy materialized beside the register, his expression rigidly professional. "Mrs. Whitfield, how lovely to see you today. I hope you're finding everything satisfactory." "Quite," the woman replied, handing her credit card to Maria. "Your cashier has been most courteous." Timothy's tight smile never reached his eyes. "Maria, once you've completed this transaction, please report to my office." He turned back to the elderly customer. "Have a wonderful day, Mrs. Whitfield." Maria completed the transaction with trembling hands, placing the receipt carefully into the bag. "Thank you for shopping with us," she said softly. Mrs. Whitfield studied her face for a moment. "Child, are you all right?" "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for asking." Maria managed a smile that belied the knot in her stomach. The elderly woman nodded thoughtfully before taking her purchase and moving toward the exit. In Timothy's office, the proceedings were brief and clinical. "This constitutes your third violation of company policy regarding personal expressions during customer engagement," he stated, sliding a termination notice across the desk. "Your final paycheck will include today's hours and any accrued vacation time." Maria signed the form with a steady hand that surprised even herself. A curious peace had settled over her, despite the uncertainty stretching before her. "May I collect my personal items?" "Denise will escort you to your locker. Company policy," Timothy added, already turning his attention back to his computer. 15 minutes later, Maria stood in the parking lot, a small box containing 5 years of employment tucked under her arm, a spare sweater, family photos that had decorated her locker, a coffee mug gifted by a co-worker 3 Christmases ago. Rain continued to fall, soaking through her light jacket as she contemplated her next move. "You look like you could use this." Maria turned to find Mrs. Whitfield standing beside her, holding out an umbrella. The elderly woman's driver waited patiently beside a sleek black sedan parked in the fire lane. "I witnessed what happened," Mrs. Whitfield continued. "That officious little man terminated you for praying, didn't he?" Maria hesitated before nodding. "It's against the new corporate policy." "Disgraceful." The older woman's mouth set in a determined line. "Get in the car, dear. No one should have to sort out unemployment in the rain." Something in the woman's tone, commanding yet compassionate, brooked no argument. Maria found herself seated in the plush leather interior of the sedan, her small box of possessions on her lap, as Mrs. Whitfield instructed her driver to proceed. "Eleanor Whitfield," the woman introduced herself, extending a hand adorned with a single diamond ring. "And you are Maria Santos, according to your name tag. 26 years old, I'd guess, and far too dignified for that soulless establishment." "How did you know my age?" Maria asked, surprised. Eleanor's eyes crinkled with amusement. "I didn't until just now. But I've spent 72 years reading people, my dear. It becomes something of a hobby in my circles." She settled back against the seat. "Now, would you care to tell me why prayer is so essential that you'd risk your livelihood for it?" Maria hesitated, unaccustomed to such direct inquiry from a stranger, yet something about Eleanor's forthright manner invited honesty. "It connects me to something larger than myself," she finally said. To God, yes, but also to my parents who I lost, to a purpose beyond just scanning groceries. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. And this job, was it essential to your survival? It paid my rent and tuition, Maria admitted. I'm studying early childhood education in the evenings. Excellent. Children need more people who understand the value of the sacred in everyday life. Eleanor reached into her handbag and extracted a business card, heavy cream stock with elegant lettering. I find myself in need of a personal assistant, Maria Santos. Someone with discretion, integrity, and apparently remarkable courage. The position includes accommodation at my residence, which would eliminate your rent concern, and a salary that should more than cover your educational expenses. Maria stared at the card, then at Eleanor. But you don't know me. I know enough. Eleanor's expression softened. I know what matters to you cannot be purchased or threatened away. That tells me everything essential about your character. She glanced out the window as the car turned into an exclusive neighborhood of grand historic homes. Besides, I don't have time for lengthy interview processes. My oncologist gives me approximately 12 weeks, give or take the efficacy of my treatments. The blunt pronouncement hung in the air between them as the car pulled through wrought iron gates and up a circular drive to a stately colonial mansion surrounded by carefully maintained gardens. I'm sorry, Maria whispered, the words inadequate against such news. Don't be, dear, 72 years is a respectable run. Eleanor's matter-of-fact tone belied the shadow that passed briefly across her features. What matters now is how I use what remains. So, the position. Are you interested? Maria found herself nodding, moved by forces she couldn't entirely name. Yes, I think I am. Excellent. Harvey will show you to the East Wing guest suite. Take today to settle in. We'll discuss specifics tomorrow. The following weeks unfolded in a rhythm entirely different from Maria's previous existence. Eleanor Whitfield proved to be demanding but scrupulously fair, her instructions precise and her expectations high. The position involved managing correspondence, coordinating medical appointments, organizing household matters, and occasionally accompanying Eleanor to social engagements where Maria observed the deference accorded to her employer by Boston's elite. What began as a professional arrangement gradually shifted towards something more complex. Eleanor, despite her outward pragmatism, revealed glimpses of vulnerability as her treatments progressed, particularly during evenings when pain kept her awake. On such nights, Maria would sit with her in the sunroom, preparing tea and sometimes reading aloud from Eleanor's extensive library. You never asked why I stopped at your register that day, Eleanor remarked one evening, 3 weeks into Maria's employment. I always use the express lane. Maria looked up from the book she'd been reading, a collection of Mary Oliver's poetry that Eleanor favored. I assumed it was coincidence. There's precious little coincidence in my life, Maria. Eleanor adjusted her position on the chaise lounge, wincing slightly. I've spent decades making decisions based on meticulous assessment. That morning, I felt compelled, truly compelled, to change my routine. Most irregular. She smiled faintly. In my 72 years, I've learned to recognize divine nudges. Maria set the book aside. You believe in God? I did once, with the absolute certainty of youth. Eleanor's gaze drifted to the darkened garden beyond the windows. My father was a Baptist minister in western Massachusetts, rather fire and brimstone in his approach, but sincere in his faith. I was the dutiful daughter until college, where philosophy and science offered different frameworks for understanding existence. She paused. Then my husband Thomas died suddenly at 43, heart attack on the squash court, and any remaining faith shattered. How could a loving God take a good man in his prime, leaving 2 young children fatherless? Maria remained silent, recognizing the sacred space of shared grief. I built my life on reason after that, Eleanor continued, raised my children, expanded Thomas's investment firm, contributed appropriately to charity. a life well ordered but hermetically sealed against anything mystical or unprovable. Her eyes returned to Maria. Until my diagnosis 4 months ago, nothing clarifies existence quite like its approaching conclusion. The following morning, Maria discovered a leather-bound journal on the breakfast tray she brought to Eleanor's room. A note attached read simply, "Some thoughts you might find illuminating. E.W." When Eleanor left for her treatment session with her regular nurse, Maria carefully opened the journal, recognizing the breach of normal boundaries this invitation represented. April 17th. Oncology confirms stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 12 months with aggressive treatment, perhaps 6 without. The curious thing is not fear, but a strange sense of insufficient completion. What exactly have I been building these 7 decades? Impressive structures, certainly. Family, business, reputation, but to what ultimate purpose? The questions I dismissed in my 40s have returned with inconvenient insistence. May 3rd. Treatment begins. The grandchildren visited. Charlotte asked if I would be with great-grandpa in heaven soon. Emily quickly shushed her, but the question lingers. What do I actually believe awaits? Oblivion seems both logical and somehow insufficient. If consciousness simply extinguishes, why does its potential absence create such existential vertigo? May 20th. Dream of Thomas last night. Not the failing Thomas of the hospital, but Thomas laughing in the summer house. He said, "The answers were always in plain sight, Ellie." Woke crying for the first time since his death. Rational explanation, medication affecting neural pathways, yet it felt more real than this journal in my hands. June 8th. Pastor Robert visited, Catherine's doing, no doubt, expected platitudes. Instead, he asked what questions I'm afraid to ask God, startled me into silence. Returned after he left to my father's Bible, untouched for decades in the library. Dust jackets crumble with age, but truth, does truth deteriorate with disuse or simply wait to be rediscovered? June 30th. Extraordinary compulsion today to deviate from routine at the market. Found myself observing a young cashier praying between customers, subtle but unmistakable. Something about her quiet devotion pierced pretenses I didn't realize I still maintained. What must it be like to possess such certainty, to practice faith so essentially that it becomes like breathing? Maria closed the journal, her heart racing with the weight of accidental purpose. Eleanor hadn't randomly encountered her. She had been watched, evaluated, and somehow, in ways Maria couldn't fully comprehend, selected as an answer to Eleanor's unspoken questions. When Eleanor returned from treatment, unusually pale and leaning heavily on her nurse's arm, Maria helped settle her into bed without mentioning the journal. Some revelations required space and time to be properly acknowledged. That night, Maria woke to urgent knocking. Eleanor's night nurse stood at her door, face tight with concern. "She's asking for you. The pain is severe, and she's refusing additional medication until she speaks with you." Maria hurried to the master suite where Eleanor lay against silk pillows, her complexion ashen, breath coming in shallow gasps. "Maria," she whispered, extending a trembling hand, "I need to ask you something while my mind remains clear." Maria took the offered hand, alarmed by its coolness. "Anything. Your prayers. What do they contain?" Eleanor's eyes, bright with pain yet intensely focused, held Maria's gaze. Not the words, but the essence. What are you reaching for in those moments? The unexpected question momentarily silenced Maria. How to articulate something so intrinsic? "Connection," she finally said. "Acknowledgement that I'm seen and known by my Creator, and that others are equally precious in His sight. Remembrance that love is the foundation of existence, not an accidental byproduct." Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. "You speak with such certainty." "Not certainty," Maria corrected gently. "Faith. They're different. Certainty claims to know everything. Faith trusts despite not knowing everything." A ghost of a smile touched Eleanor's lips. "Semantics, my dear." "Not at all." Maria's voice strengthened. Certainty leaves no room for growth or discovery. Faith is a living relationship, constantly deepening, sometimes challenging. It's not static knowledge, but dynamic trust. Eleanor was quiet for so long that Maria thought she might have drifted to sleep. Then her eyes opened, clearer than before. "In my journal, you read it?" "Yes." "Then you know I've been circling the same questions for months. Intellectual understanding fails me now. I need something more." She paused, searching for the right word. "Experiential." "What are you asking, Eleanor?" "When I was 12, my father baptized me in our church. It was expected, proper, and ultimately meaningless to me, a social formality." Eleanor's grip on Maria's hand tightened. "I find myself wanting something authentic before I die. A genuine commitment, not to religion or dogma, but to the God I've spent decades avoiding while he apparently continued pursuing me." Her voice broke slightly. "Would you baptize me, Maria? Not as a religious professional, but as someone whose faith I've witnessed in action." The request stunned Maria into momentary silence. "I'm not ordained, or—" "The early church didn't require seminary degrees for acts of faith," Eleanor interrupted, with a flash of her usual decisiveness. "I've been reading while you attend classes. The original baptisms were acts of community, of welcome and commitment. I'm asking you, Maria Santos, as a genuine representative of the faith I seek to embrace, to help me make this commitment real." Maria felt the weight of the request settle on her shoulders, not as burden, but as sacred trust. "Yes," she whispered, "of course I will." The following morning, with Eleanor feeling stronger after a night of better rest, preparations began. The indoor pool in the mansion's west wing, unused since Eleanor's children had grown, was prepared according to her instructions. Maria helped her employer dress in a simple white garment, purchased by the household manager through discreet arrangements. No guests were invited, only the household staff who wished to attend as witnesses. Pastor Michael, whom Maria had called for guidance, arrived to offer a blessing, but readily agreed that Maria should perform the baptism herself. Eleanor stood at the pool's edge, looking simultaneously frail and formidable in the simple white dress. "I should say something, shouldn't I? Isn't there a profession of faith traditional at these moments?" Maria smiled. "Just speak what's in your heart, Eleanor. God already knows it anyway." Eleanor nodded, gathering herself. "I have lived 72 years believing I was the primary author of my existence," she began, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I now recognize that was both arrogant and inaccurate. There has been another hand writing my story alongside mine, patient, persistent, and loving beyond my comprehension." She looked at each person present, her gaze finally resting on Maria. "Today, I acknowledge that author and commit what remains of my life to better understanding his purposes. Whatever time I have left belongs to God." She turned to Maria, who stood waiting in the shallow end of the pool. With surprising steadiness, Eleanor descended the steps and moved toward her. Maria gently placed one hand behind Eleanor's shoulders and raised the other. "Eleanor Whitfield, upon your profession of faith, I baptize you in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." As Eleanor was immersed and raised again, her face shone with an emotion Maria had never before witnessed in her employer, pure, unrestrained joy. The household staff applauded spontaneously, some wiping tears from their eyes at the unexpected vulnerability of their usually composed employer. Later, as Pastor Michael prepared to leave, he embraced Maria warmly. "Divine appointments rarely announce themselves with trumpets," he murmured. "More often they appear as moments of disruption, a job loss, an unexpected encounter, a deviation from routine." Maria nodded, understanding flowing through her like a current. Everything that seemed like an ending was actually a doorway. "Exactly, my daughter. We rarely recognize the significance of our witness until long afterward, if ever." He glanced toward Eleanor, who sat wrapped in blankets nearby, a peaceful expression on her face. Some plant, some water, but God brings the growth. Your faithfulness in small things prepared you for this greater purpose. The remaining weeks of summer passed with surprising sweetness. Eleanor's physical decline continued steadily, but her spirit seemed increasingly unburdened. She insisted on attending church with Maria each Sunday, her questions afterward reflecting genuine engagement rather than intellectual sparring. On a golden September afternoon, with sunlight streaming through the sunroom windows, Eleanor motioned Maria closer to her chaise lounge. "I've amended my will," she said without preamble. "The house and primary estate remain with my children, of course, but I've established a foundation. You'll be its director." Maria began to protest, but Eleanor raised a silencing hand. "The Whitfield Santos Foundation for Vocational Dignity will provide educational scholarships and small business grants to service workers seeking greater independence. People like you, Maria, individuals of exceptional character, constrained by economic circumstances rather than capability." Tears filled Maria's eyes as the scope of Eleanor's vision became clear. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept." Eleanor's expression was earnest. "Say you'll help others find their divine appointments, as I found mine through you." Maria nodded, unable to speak past the emotion constricting her throat. "Excellent." Eleanor settled back against her pillows, satisfaction evident in her face. "Now, read me something hopeful. Perhaps those psalms you mentioned, the ones about ascent." As Maria read the ancient words of pilgrimage and homecoming, she felt the wooden cross pendant warm against her skin, a tangible reminder of faith's continuity across generations. What had begun as 7 seconds of prayer at Register 12 had somehow expanded into this moment, this calling, this unexpected spiritual legacy. Eleanor's eyes drifted closed, her breathing growing even with peaceful sleep. Maria continued reading softly, grateful for the mysterious ways divine purpose revealed itself in the most ordinary of human encounters. A quiet cashier, an observant customer, and the invisible threads of grace connecting what appeared, on the surface, to be random moments in time. 3 weeks later, Eleanor Whitfield passed peacefully in her sleep. The foundation she established continues her legacy, providing pathways to dignified work and education for hundreds of service industry employees annually. And at Foundation headquarters, a simple plaque bears witness to its inception. Sacred moments occur at unexpected thresholds, sometimes even at Register 12.